about DreamBank, just in case you're not familiar with who we are and what we do. We at American Family Insurance believe your dream's the most valuable thing you'll ever own, so much so that we created DreamBank. We are a free community space located in downtown Madison, Wisconsin, that's 100% dedicated to the inspiration and pursuit of dreams. Due to everything that's going on right now, we can't actually be in our physical space, but we've pivoted and we decided to start streaming our events online so you can continue your dream pursuit from the inside of your own home. But enough about me. We are going to dive right into today's presentation and our speaker. John Zeratsky is a veteran technology designer, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of Sprint and Make Time. He has worked with more than 200 of the world's most important and innovative organizations, including Google, Harvard, Slack, IDEO, and Netflix. I do spend a lot of time on Netflix now. John studied journalism at the University of Wisconsin and graduated from the UW School of Human Ecology, where he's now an advisor to the dean and faculty. And then also after today's presentation, we will be giving away 2 of John's books, Make Time. In order to enter into the drawing, just leave a comment with your biggest takeaway from today, and I will pick 2 winners. All right, take it away, John.
All right. Thanks, Maddie. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share a few thoughts about making time for what matters. I think all of us wish we could spend more time on the stuff that really matters to us and less time on the other things that get in the way, all those little distractions and obligations and things that pop up. But as you might have noticed, this is increasingly difficult to do. And it's difficult because we live in kind of a crazy world, a world where we spend all day sitting in front of our computers in back-to-back Zoom meetings or calls, a world where we've got these amazing devices that we keep by our sides at all times. But instead of using their amazing capabilities to help us do amazing things, more often than not, they just kind of annoy us with their constant stream of interruptions and horrifying news updates. And in the world we're living in, at the end of a busy day or a busy week, we sometimes look back and we wonder, what happened? Like, what did I do with all that time? I know that I was busy and I know that maybe I even felt like I was productive, but I don't always feel like I was able to spend that time on the things that matter most to me. And I don't know if this sort of thing ever happens to you, but happens to me a lot and more in the last couple of weeks. And when it does, I can't help but wonder why. And I can't help but think, what could I have done differently? What can I do differently next week to make sure that I don't just go through the week in sort of this reactive blur? And when I think about this, my thoughts often turn to willpower. I think next week I'll be stronger. Next week I'll have more discipline. I'll be more focused. I'll eat the right foods. I'll get exercise. I'll get enough sleep, all that stuff. But I've been researching this for a long time, and I've worked with literally hundreds of teams on the sort of question of how they should spend their time together. And I've written a couple of books about it. And my take is that there's actually a much simpler explanation for why it's so hard to focus our time on the things that matter. And this explanation it's so simple that we often discount it. We assume that it can't possibly be true. And so instead, we beat ourselves up about not having enough willpower. And that explanation is defaults. And I know it's kind of anticlimactic, and default itself it's kind of a wonky word, but it's a common and important concept in the world of technology. And I worked for many years as a technology designer. And default is basically the way that something works before you've configured it or customized it to suit your needs. And these defaults are everywhere in our world. So take, for example, a typical smartphone. Let's say you get a new smartphone, you take it out of the box, and one of the very first things you do is you log into your email account. By default, that phone has an email app installed, obviously. By default, it's going to check for new emails in the background at all times, and it's going to notify you whenever a new message comes in, right? You didn't ask the phone to do that. It's just the way it works. It's just what happens by default. By default, your phone also has a web browser pre-installed. It's like a Swiss Army knife for distraction. You can access any information in the world at a moment's notice. And by default, your phone even has a notification to remind you just how far behind you are on your to-do list, as if you needed a reminder of that. By default, our phones also come pre-installed with things like breaking news and streaming video and stock market updates. And I call these infinity pool apps because there's always more content there. There's always more water in the pool. You can jump back in at any time. And again, you didn't ask for these things to be there. It's not like you went through and made a deliberate series of decisions about every single thing you wanted on your phone. No, it's just the stuff that's there by default. But these defaults don't just exist in our technology. They also exist in our cultures and our norms and our schedules. And consider the typical professional calendar. By default, it's got meetings sort of scattered throughout the week, leaving these little scraps of time where we try to squeeze in our actual work. The stuff we really have to get done, the stuff that matters. By default, in many organizations, other people can add things to your calendar. And even if not, by default, the normal thing, the polite thing, the default thing is to say yes to every meeting you're invited to, even if you know that some of those meetings may not be a great use of time. And these defaults individually, they don't seem like a big deal, but they add up. Think about the effect they have. On a typical day, you wake up in the morning, you grab your phone, you check your email, you look at whatever notifications are there, and then, you've got to get ready, you've got to get things set up for the day. Maybe you've got, kids that you got to tend to, you've got meetings lined up. And again, these things were not part of some, master plan. They're just the things that happen. And so a lot of these defaults, the crazy thing is that they're sort of accidental. They're accidental defaults, yet we live our lives by them. And these defaults, they're important because they define our normal. Because of these defaults, it's normal to be busy. It's normal to be distracted. It's normal to feel like you never have enough time. Now, if you are dissatisfied with this normal, like I am, what can you do about it? Well, I think it's possible to create a new normal for yourself. In fact, I think right now we are all being forced to adjust to a new normal, whether we like it or not. And so we have this brief opportunity, this brief moment to shape these new normals before they solidify. And the key to creating a new normal is to create new defaults so that the right choices, the choices that you want to be making, the things that you want to be spending your time on, so that those choices become the easy, automatic choices. So you're not fighting against the defaults. You don't have to rely on willpower to stay strong and clench your fists and grit your teeth and make it through. You don't have to beat yourself up for not doing the things that you know that you should be doing or that you want to be doing. But if you want to make these changes, one thing you do need is you need a system. You need a systematic way of structuring your time and the time of those around you, the people that you work with, the people that you live with, based around the things that you care most about. And so today, with the rest of my time, I'm going to share 2 systems that you can use as you figure out your new normal. And so what I'm going to do for the rest of my time is I'm going to tell you the story of the design sprint process. I'm going to talk about how that translates into another system called Make Time that I helped to develop. Then I'm going to share with you the specific concrete tactics that I've been using every day as I've been adjusting to life during the COVID crisis. And then finally, I'm going to tell you how to get started using these tactics for yourself. So before we do any of that, let's start with a little bit of history. Let's go back to a time when I didn't know any of the stuff that I'm about to tell you. The very beginning of my career in the early 2000s, I wanted to be productive as possible. I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to make the most of the opportunities that I had. But my perspective on productivity, on what it meant to make good use of my time, totally changed in 2011 when I joined Google Ventures. And GV, as it is now known, is the venture capital firm that's funded by Google. And so here's how it works. Every year, Google has some extra money, essentially leftover money that they made from their business. And GV takes that and invests it into outside companies, so independent companies that are not connected to Google in any way. And I had the coolest job ever at GV, because after an investment was made, what I would do is I would go inside that company that we had invested in and work with them, sort of like a consultant, and help them reach whatever goals that they had for the business. And the teams at these startups were brilliant. They had all the right skills and experience. They were working on these big, exciting problems and opportunities. But despite all their advantages, I saw again and again how these teams struggled to focus on the work that was really important to their businesses. They had fragmented calendars. They had overflowing inboxes and never-ending to-do lists. Now, I had personally struggled with these things myself, and I think everybody has struggled with these things to some extent. But seeing it back to back to back, from team to team to team, it just gave me the sense that, like, wow, this is a universal challenge. Even these, highly funded, high-tech, sophisticated startups, even they struggle with this thing. Plus, because they were startups, they had an extra special challenge, sort of a special problem with time, which is that they only had a certain amount of it to prove the validity of their business model, right? So they had some amount of time, some number of months to prove that their business was going to work before they ran out of money. So I would watch as they worked for weeks, months, before they ever got to the point where they could launch something into the world and test their business model and be sure that they were spending their time on the right things. And I worked for the venture capital firm that was funding these companies, so I had a very real vested interest in helping them figure that out ASAP. And I thought, there's got to be a better way for teams to be spending their time together. And around this time, I met this guy named Jake Knapp. And Jake was a designer at Google who had begun experimenting with this new process for team collaboration that he called a design sprint. And the idea with the design sprint was to pull a team together and kind of give them a structured process. It's a system, like I said, give them a structured process that helps that team focus together on solutions to the big problems and opportunities that they're facing. And when a team decides to run a design sprint, they decide to adopt a new set of defaults for the duration of that sprint. For example, instead of worrying about everything at once in a design sprint, teams really focus. They focus on one thing at a time. Instead of relying on email and chat and Slack to move projects forward bit by bit, in a design sprint, teams work together face-to-face, whether that's together in the same room or over a video conferencing or something like that. And instead of the default of chopped up days, of fragmented calendars where they would have to squeeze their work in between all the other meetings and obligations that they had going on, in a design sprint, teams have time to really focus on the work that matters. Jake had been running an early version of this design sprint process at Google, and we thought this could be an amazing tool for the companies that we were investing in at GV. So in 2012, we brought Jake to our team at Google Ventures, and we began running these design sprints exclusively with the startups in the Google Ventures portfolio. Some of them were the kinds of technology companies that you would expect, but we also ran these processes with healthcare companies and robotics companies and coffee companies and all sorts of different things. And after a couple dozen of these design sprints, we had refined and tweaked and gotten the model down to a 5-day format. And so what we would do is we would go into a company and we'd say, give us a week of your time. And we would take their typical fragmented calendar, the calendar that all of us know so well, and we would wipe away those meetings, and we would put into place a new set of activities, a new structure for the week. And by following the steps of the process, it was possible for these teams, by the end of the week, they could build a realistic prototype and test it with real customers. It enabled them to do in just 5 days what often took weeks or months in the sort of default business as usual ways of working that they were used to. this test on Friday with these customers at the end of the design sprint. This was sort of like an opportunity to travel to the future. It was like these teams got to jump in their DeLorean time machine and zoom ahead to the day when their new product was live or their new marketing campaign launched, or even just that moment when their customer first realized that they exist. And they got to be there in that moment to listen, to watch, to ask questions, to learn, and to bring back what they learned into the present day so that they could make better decisions about how they were spending their time as a team. And over the years, we used these design sprints for all sorts of things. We ran about 150 of them between 2012 and 2016, and we used them to design products and marketing and services. But we were also, with these design sprints, we were also designing time, because we had this really unique laboratory, this opportunity to go inside all these companies and change the defaults of how they work so that they could spend their time more focused on the work that really matters. In 2016, we published our book Sprint, which is a step-by-step guide for how to run your own design sprint. And since then, we've watched as the process has spread to thousands of teams around the world, not just technology companies, but large companies of all kinds, nonprofits, governments, universities, agencies, consultancies. And every single one of these organizations, they're using the design sprint process to change the defaults of how they work and redesign their work week. And it's really cool. It's really exciting. But there is a problem. It takes a whole week and a whole team to run a design sprint. It is kind of a big commitment. But Jake and I, we were so excited and inspired by the stories and the results that we've been hearing. And we wondered, what if we could redesign every day? What if we could take this same kind of thinking, this same philosophy about time, and apply it to all the days that came in between the design sprints? So we looked back at some of the lessons that we had learned, and we began running experiments. We sort of used ourselves as guinea pigs and tried to figure out ways of being more focused or less distracted or having better energy. And when we found an experiment that worked really well for us, we would share it with the world. We would write a blog post or an article about it and ask people to try it for themselves. And people would, and they would write back to us. Now, not everybody was a fan, of course. You know, some people just wanted to tell us that they thought we were idiots and that we should stop what we were doing. But a lot of people, they really found a lot of value in these experiments. They said that it helped them, enjoy their life a bit more or spend their time on the things that were really important to them. So, based on all this experimentation, and validated by what we had been hearing back from readers, we eventually came up with more than 100 individual tactics. So we expanded this sort of collection of these experiments to more than 100 concrete, specific, everyday actions that people can use to focus their efforts, just like the teams running those design sprints had done. And having written Sprint and enjoyed that process, we wanted to write a book about this too. But our editor advised us that maybe 100 was too many tactics to include in the book. So we managed to get it down to 87, which I know is still a lot. And I'm not joking. There really are 87 individual tactics in our book, Make Time, which came out in 2018. But unlike our book Sprint, which offers a very specific step-by-step recipe for how to run a design sprint, Make Time is more like a cookbook. So it's got a lot of recipes in it. And just like any cookbook, the goal is not to make all of them. The goal is to find the ones that appeal to you, try them, tweak them, experiment with them, make them your own. The goal is not to do them all. And I encourage you to explore all these tactics. You know, if you get your hands on a copy of the book, maybe you'll win one of the copies. You can check them out and you can find the ones that work for you. But what I want to do with the 5 or so minutes that I have left is I want to take you through 5 of these tactics. So these are 5 that I have turned to again and again over the last few weeks as I have struggled to stay focused and stay sane and stay healthy amid this crisis that we're all living through. So let's get into it. The first one that I want to share, and this is literally tactic number 1, in our book, is to choose a highlight for your day. Now, to explain what I mean, I want you to imagine that it's the end of the day. All right, so it's nighttime, the stars are out, and you're thinking back on the day, you're reflecting back, and if you ask yourself, what was my highlight? What was the thing that happened today that I was the most excited about, or it really made me happy, or I'm glad I finished it, or I was just satisfied that I finally made the time for it. Now hold that picture in your head, and now let's flip it. Instead of waiting to the end of the day to see what happened, what turned out to be the highlight, what if you asked this question at the start of the day? What if you asked, what will be the highlight of your day? And this sounds super simple, and it sounds like it wouldn't actually make a difference, but it does. And I want you to try it. You don't have to do it now, although you can if you've got some paper nearby. You can wait till later. But I want you to think about the one thing that you most want to make time for, and I want you to write it down. It might be something that needs to get done. It might be something you've been meaning to get around to. It could be something that's just fun, or it could even be something that's going to happen either way, no matter what, but you want to make sure that you bring your best energy and attention and focus to that one activity. Now, of course, your highlight is not the only thing that you'll do. That's unrealistic, but there is a surprising sense of clarity and purpose that comes from identifying that one thing that you most want to make time for. So that's the highlight. That's the first tactic. The second tactic that I want to share with you is tactic number 13 from the book, and it is called Design Your Day. And so the idea here is that once you know what your highlight is, you can proactively build your day around it. Instead of just hoping that it happens or hoping to get to it at some point, you can really make it a building block, make it a priority of your day. And that's what this tactic is all about. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, more often than not, our calendars, they look something like this. And as a result, most people kind of hate our calendars. It's a list of stuff that somebody else made that has all the things that we have to do. But we can choose to use our calendars as our plan for the day of the stuff that of course, the stuff that we have to do, but the stuff that we want to do, the stuff that's really important to us. And we can use our calendar to design our day around those things. Now, nobody has complete control over their schedule, of course, but you'd be surprised how much wiggle room you have, especially when it comes to meetings with other people. Most people, turns out, are happy to cancel a meeting or shorten a meeting. And so if you can, cancel a couple things and maybe condense a few things and move some things, and, maybe now that everybody's working from home, you don't need a daily stand-up meeting. You can just post your updates into Slack or whatever. You can kind of compartmentalize your time around certain activities. And then you can begin to really design your day, starting with that highlight that we talked about, and plan a time for that. Maybe a morning routine and breakfast with your kids or something like that. You can give yourself kind of a time to log off at the end of the day. So planning some exercise, time to go for a walk that sort of tells you, okay, it's time to be done with work now, because as I'm sure you've seen, work can kind of expand to fill every moment of our lives in the environment that we're living in now. So that's, now that you've designed your day, you've got a plan for the day that is yours. And this is especially important right now because so many of our normal structures and routines have been wiped away. And so this gives us kind of a brief opportunity to set up our own structures before they just haphazardly fall into place. Now, one more quick tip about this, you might find that some of these activities become a part of your daily routine, right? So there are things that you do every single day at the same time. And if that's the case, you can make yourself a calendar template where things actually repeat. And this is what I do. This is how I plan my weeks and my days, is I have this certain blocks that repeat every single day. And this is an actual screenshot of my calendar template. So it may be difficult for you to see, but it's got everything from when I wake up to when I drink coffee to when I work and when I answer email, all kind of scheduled out. So that's design your day. That's the second tactic. All right, we've been talking about the things that you want to make time for. And if choosing and scheduling your highlight, if that's offense, now we're going to talk about defense. So that's what tactic number 24, distraction kryptonite, is all about. Now, I want you to think about your phone for a second. And, there's probably a ton of distracting stuff on that phone. So there's probably, all of the built-in apps that I mentioned, plus all the other things that you've installed over the years. And they're all vying for your attention at the same time. But I found that for most people, there's like one thing that they find especially difficult to resist, one thing that sort of rises above the rest in terms of annoyance. And I like to think of this as your distraction kryptonite. So just as Superman is powerless when confronted by real kryptonite, you too might feel powerless when it comes to your distraction kryptonite. If you've ever glanced at your phone to check the time and then realized 30 minutes later that you're scrolling through Instagram, then you know what I mean. You know the power of distraction kryptonite. It might be social media. It might be the news, especially these days. It might be your email or games that you like to play. And so what I want you to try, the experiment that I have for you, is to block or remove that app. Just that one thing. Just take that distraction kryptonite out of the equation by uninstalling it from your phone, by disabling it if it's a built-in app like the web browser. If it's a website, you can actually log out and change your password. And all of these things will actually create barriers and friction around those distractions, making it more difficult to get sucked in the first place. All right, next tactic number 79, which is called leave your headphones at home. And this one has nothing to do with distraction or focus or anything like that. It's all about creating space, creating quiet and calm in your day. Now, I want to turn to the esteemed New York Times, who's tackling the hard-hitting journalistic questions of our age by asking whether it's okay to take a walk. It's an important question, and thankfully they said it is. They give it a thumbs up. And the truth is that walking is kind of one of our areas of refuge right now. It's one of the few things that we can still do to go outside, to get some fresh air, to keep our bodies moving. So by all means, go for a walk. But you may be tempted to use that time productively by listening to a podcast or an audiobook. And instead, what I want you to try doing is create some mental space. Use this walk as an opportunity to create a bit of margin, a bit of calm in your day, and simply leave your headphones at home. Now, I'm talking about this in the context of walking, but it could be anything. It could be when you're doing the dishes or you're unwinding at the end of the day. You don't need to fill every moment with information and entertainment and inputs. It can be valuable, especially now. It can be really valuable to have a bit of time to just do nothing. Okay, the final tactic that I want to share with you is so important that it doesn't even have a number. It gets its own chapter at the end of the book, and it's about taking notes and paying attention to what's working for you each day. And it's funny, we're used to being analytical and critical about our work. We do retrospectives and postmortems and all these things. But when it comes to our time, this most finite of resources, we don't pay attention in that same way. But I want you to try it. I want you to try reflecting every day. And this is because the best way to make any of these changes that I'm talking about, any of these new habits or these new tactics, is to take it one day at a time. Not to dream of some magical, perfect future where everything will be different, but to figure out what you can do today and tomorrow and the day after that. In Make Time, we've got a template that you can use for taking these notes, a couple of really simple questions. This is not a big journaling exercise, much simpler than that. For the last few weeks during this sort of lockdown period, my wife and I have started a new journal where we kind of write down what's going on in the world, what we've been up to, what we're grateful for, and our menu, the food that we ate, because we like to cook. So that's it. And those five, those are my sort of tactic stack, the tactics that I've turned to every day during this crisis to try to stay focused and stay sane. Choose a highlight, design your day, Distraction Kryptonite, leave your headphones at home, and take notes to track results, reflect every day. So those are 5 out of the 87 that are in the book. And like I said, I encourage you to explore them all and find the things that help you focus on what matters every day. Now, if you want to get started with this stuff, like Maddie said, there's the giveaway of the 2 books, but I've also put together a little webpage for you. If you go to maketime.blog/DreamBank, there's a bunch of resources there. There's some free stuff you can download. And there's even a link to buy the book at a really steep discount, a 40% discount, which is less than what you can get it for at Amazon. So if you want to get started with this stuff, this is a great place to do that and to check it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I know I was taking a bunch of notes. The one, my main takeaway is about the design your day. Right now, my plan is totally a hope and a prayer. That's my main strategy, and hence why I'm sending emails at like 11 o'clock at night, because my day just got away from me. So that will be the one thing that I'm going to implement now.
Cool.
So thank you so much for that. Everyone, leave your comments, and probably in about 10 minutes, I will choose 2 winners, and then I will contact you guys. But thank you so much. Please continue logging on to all of our page and watching our stuff. Sorry, I have a fear of public speaking. So, but thank you so much. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.